All right, welcome again, everybody. This is Group Two's presentation on osteopathic medicine. We have Lucas, Mary, Stephanie, and what's the
Doug.
what's what is it?
Doug.
Doug.
I was cheating looking at the names from the faces, and yours has not come up with your name. So
Secret.
I'm gonna go ahead and turn the time on over to you guys. Once we're done with this presentation, there'll be a quick question and answer, and that's about it. So go ahead and take it away.
All right, so I'll start it off. What is osteopathic medicine? So let's go to the next slide. So osteopathic medical degree, if you want to hit that next slide, we'll get into it. So an osteopathic physician is called a DO. Degrees allows DOs to perform surgeries and prescribe medication. The difference is a lot of people like to compare and contrast DOs with MDs, and the difference between MDs is that they treat the symptoms with drugs and surgery, whereas DOs treat the body as a whole and not specific symptoms. And so that's kind of the big thing with the DOs, that they kind of just look at the whole body and want to work with the whole body. And so schooling for them, in order to kind of get in the the school itself to become a DO, a lot of the people that have been accepted have bachelors, and you have to get a good score on the MCAT, and the MCAT is it's the medical college admission test. So a lot of people get between 8 and 9 in the different categories of biological and physical science, as well as verbal reasoning. You also need a decent GPA of about 3.5 and up in science and non-science, and all of those that have been accepted have bachelors. And of course, you have to look at the classes that are required by the school. So if you want to hit that next slide there. So the schooling is about 4 years long when you get accepted into the DO school. It's followed by an internship and then at least 2 years minimum of a residency in the state that you're going to practice in. So in the courses and the classes, it requires about 300 to 500 hours on the skeletal system and the body, interaction with diseases. So they want you to kind of know how the body itself, the skeletal system works, the muscles and all that. That way they can treat that whole part of the body and not just the one symptom itself. And so let's go to the next page there. So when and where was the first osteopathic medical program launched? Let's go to the next slide. So Dr. Andrew Still, or Taylor Still, was the forefather of all of this, the idea of osteopathic medicine. If you want to hit that next slide. He was a surgeon during the Civil War. I'll kind of go over him briefly. I don't want to go too much because later in the presentation they'll talk about him again. He believed that the effects of illness and injury should be treated and not the illness alone. He believed surgical practices were dated and resulted in more deaths than cures. Because as a surgeon in the Civil War, he saw that it wasn't really working. His father was a surgeon as well, and he just thought all these practices were kind of wrong, and they were using all these different medicines like tobacco and like alcohol and all these just strange medicines, and he's like, this just isn't right. And so he then founded the American School of Osteopathy in Kirksville, Missouri in 1892. So that's how it all began. So we'll go to the next slide, and who's ever next.
Okay, so osteopathic versus traditional training. Next slide. So the main differences between the two is a DO usually studies like more of in-depth the spine and muscles and how to use the body itself to treat it. And an MD usually just focuses on like the medicine and the clinical training in hospitals. They are both certified licensed practitioners and physicians. They can both treat and diagnose disorders as well. Next slide. Is there competition between MDs and osteopaths? Next slide. So what I found is that it is kind of competitive. There is like hard feelings toward DOs because you need a lower MCAT score to get your degree, and MDs usually have to have a higher MCAT score. But they usually have the basic training is usually the same for both of them. The only difference is like specialty wise. So other than that, they're newer excuse me. They're newer to the medical field than MDs are. So next slide.
So where are the DO schools located? If you can go to the next slide, there's a map that we can see. There are 31 colleges of osteopathic medicine. As you can see, there's a lot on like more of the East Coast, and there isn't in very many in this area that well, depends on where everyone is, but in Idaho and kind of the northern part, there isn't as many, but they do have them around the whole entire country with 31 schools. If you can go to the next slide, they'll show you the different names of the schools here with the links if you wanted to check them out as well. And you can continue on to the next slide.
That's me. Who are the principal figures in the development of osteopathic medicine? And I kind of went through and just picked people who stood out to me as notable, who kind of have helped the cause. I'll just put it that way. The first one is, if you could switch, please. The first one is Andrew Taylor Stills. And then, as we just heard, he's the father of osteopathic medicine. And just as a little side note, he describes his feeling about what he was learning as almost as being revelatory, like he was being inspired by God. He was a religious man. His father was a Methodist minister as well as a doctor, so he had a religious upbringing. But when you read what he wrote, it sounds very much almost like scripture. It's pretty cool. But he served in the Civil War. He lost 3 of his own children to spinal meningitis. And if you can imagine the things he saw in the Civil War, and then to come home and lose his children, he just felt that the orthodox medicine wasn't helping. It was ineffective and harmful. So he decided he was going to dive in and figure out what he could do to improve medicine and what he could do to improve his treatment of his patients. If you could please switch. He devoted 10 years of his life studying the human body, trying to find better ways to treat the diseases. He dissected multiple cadavers, looking at the bones and the muscle structures and the nerves, and trying to figure out how things work together. He described the bones as levers to manipulate the body, to open up the neural processes so that the body could heal itself. He said a part of the body is in ailment, and when you manipulate the bone and the muscles correctly, the rest of the body can respond. And I'm not saying exactly the way he did. He actually said it quite beautifully, but it's to that effect. It's the rest of the body will respond to heal the part that is diseased. If you could switch, please. I just included this quote because I thought it was beautiful, and it kind of explains how he felt about what he was researching. He says, "The God of nature is the fountain of skill and wisdom, and the mechanical work done in all natural bodies is the result of absolute knowledge. Man cannot add anything to this perfect work, nor improve the functioning of the normal body. Man's power to cure is good as far as he has knowledge of the right and normal position, and so far as he has skill to adjust the bones, muscles, and ligaments, and give freedom to blood, nerves, secretions, and excretions, and no farther. We credit God with perfect wisdom and skill to perform the perfect work on the house of life in which man lives. It is only justice that God should receive this credit, and we are ready to adjust the parts and receive the results." I just thought it was cool. I'm going to keep it in my book of quotes. If you could switch to the next one, please. Osteopathic medicine came under a lot of attack. There was a lot of reforms going on in the medical field, and we'll explain that here in a minute with the next question. But a lot of the medical schools were closing down, and osteopathic medicine was considered an alternative medicine. And so most of the schools were closed down for osteopathic medicine, except for 8. But one person who stood up for it was Mark Twain. And it was because he suffered from bronchitis and his daughter suffered from seizures. And when he heard that they were trying to close the schools there, I believe it was in New York, he decided that he was going to stand up for the practice, because his osteopathic doctor had helped him and his daughter. So if you could switch, I think I have another quote. He said, "I don't know as I cared much about these osteopaths until I heard you were going to drive them out of the state. But since I heard that, I haven't been able to sleep." And so he went and he testified before the court in defense of osteopathic medicine. And he did it at his own peril. The medical establishment went after him after this and tried to make him look bad. But he stood up and he took it, and he continued to say that it works and to let it stay. And so he contributed to making osteopathic medicine accredited, I guess is the right word. If you could switch, please. Another one is McNamara, Robert McNamara. He's the first to accept osteopathic physicians into the military. And then, of course, Ronald Blanc is the first Surgeon General of the military, and he was a DO, not an MD. He might have been both, actually, but he was a DO, and so he's the first to be accepted into the military. If you could switch, please. And then I included her because I thought it was pretty cool. She's the first Black woman to serve as a dean of a U.S. medical school, and she is a DO. If you could switch.
So I was able to talk.
Go ahead, sorry.
With Dr. Robert Meredith, who is a DO. He's my wife's OBGYN and works at the Women's Center here in Rexburg, Idaho. And I was able to ask him these questions. Why did you choose to become an osteopath rather than an MD? And do you feel that there are more important differences? What are those differences? And he decided to be a DO. Is mainly based on hearing about this particular school here, the Kirksville College of Osteopathic Medicine. And also just for his family is why he chose to go there as well. There's actually another doctor that works at the same women's center that also went to that Kirksville College of Osteopathic Medicine, and he said he loved it, and that there aren't that many differences in the way that they go about being an OBGYN as an MD and a DO. They do pretty much the same things, but what he was saying was different in the way that they learned is that, once again, how we already said, that they treat it as treating the whole body instead of just one symptom type thing. And being an OBGYN, he was explaining how you pretty much have to do that no matter what, because the body's so different, and you have to treat pretty much the whole entire woman's body while she's pregnant. And so he just said it helped him a lot to do what he wanted to do. And he said he loves his job. So you can continue the next slide.
Kind of add to what you just said. When I was calling around looking for a DO to interview, a lot of them had specialties. One worked with seizures, and another one worked with podiatry, and another one was a sports medicine. So they're very similar now, and they can prescribe medications. And that's one thing that Andrew Steele said, is he began prescribing medications and using pharmaceuticals, but after practicing what he felt, the manipulation of the bones and the muscles, he actually said, we don't need the pharmaceuticals. I can do just as much or better just manipulating the body. Of course, that was a long time ago, and pharmaceuticals have gotten much better, as well as DOs, but still, it was just kind of an interesting fact to me. Okay, next question. Describe and explain Abraham Flexner's report. If you could switch, please. He was not a medical doctor, but he was a teacher, and he wanted to make sure that medical schools were teaching in excellence. He wanted them to be teaching biology and teaching in the lab and science, and he wanted medicine to be structured after the German in science instead of being more focused on money. He was actually commissioned by the Carnegie Foundation to go and to research doctors' schools, medical schools. And so he traveled all across the nation and went to all these different schools, interviewing deans. But more importantly, he went and he interviewed the doctors who taught at the facilities, at the medical schools, and he interviewed the lab technicians and he interviewed the students. He wanted to get a feel of what was being taught and how successful they were being. And he found that oftentimes a lot of the schools were more geared toward financial gain. When he came back in 1910, he published his report, and he found, and that resulted in dramatic change in the medical education in the U.S. I did that part. Let's see. He criticized the schools as a loose and lax apprenticeship system that lacked defined standards. In other words, there is no cohesive, kind of like what we've been reading in our homework, no certification or bylaws or anything that would bring a standard for medical schools. They all had different things that they taught and different standards. There were a lax apprenticeship system and lacked defined standards or goals beyond the generation of financial gain. He proposed strong foundation in the biomedical sciences coupled with hands-on clinical training. Please switch. As a result of his report, between 1910 and 1935, more than half of the medical schools closed. And as a little side note from there, that's where the ridicule of osteopathic medicine happened. And they called it alternative, and they closed all of them pretty much except for 8. 8 survived. His report resulted in a great improvement in the quality of medical education. No medical school can be created without prior permission of the state government and the state branch of the American Medical Association has this oversight over the medical schools. And then the medical profession becomes well paid and highly respected profession in the USA and Canada. Please switch. And when those are just
These are sources.
Yeah.
The next page as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect.
All right, very good. You ready for a couple questions?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, so this is opened up for anybody. Whoever wants to answer it, you're more than welcome to. Okay, let's start with a question. If someone to ask you after what you've learned now, what's the difference between a DO and a real doctor? What would you say?
I would just.
Actually,
go ahead. Put your hand up.
All right. Yeah, I didn't know how you were gonna answer, but I think one major difference about it is how they choose to, I guess, treat the different symptoms that people are feeling or whatever's going on with them. How they look at it more as a whole, and how they don't necessarily go straight to medicine or doing something, abruptly. Oh, I'm just going to give you this for you to get better. They try to heal your body first and heal you more natural. It's more of a natural. How the DO that I interviewed told me it seems like home remedy type stuff that they try to teach you to do for yourself in order to get your whole body better before that one thing gets better.
And Doug, what were you gonna say?
Yeah, kind of similar. Like working at a hospital, I get to communicate with a lot of doctors that come through, and so just you see what they do, and certain doctors, they look at a patient like, oh, you got a lump in your throat, let's cut out that thyroid and we'll give you medications for the rest of your life, whereas from what I've understood from this career, that they wouldn't do that. They'd look at what other part of the body or what can we do with the body as a whole to cure that lump in the throat, to maybe it'll go away after time if you do something else, instead of just going at it with medications and surgery. So that's what I've come to learn.
Yes.
Yeah, I would just add, they look at the body and how they can influence the body so that the body will heal itself. they look at lifestyle, they look at manipulation, they look at any home remedy, but it opens the body up so that it will heal itself, is the way I understand it.
One thing I'd like to add also, based off the question I asked, is what's the difference between a DO and a real doctor? One thing I want to point out, and you guys are all right in your answers, is that DOs are real doctors. I want to make that very, very clear.
Yeah.
And I know you guys know that as well. So don't think I'm marking you wrong for not saying that at all. But they certainly are real doctors. In fact, it would surprise me if many of you who are watching this, or maybe that did a presentation on this here, would be surprised to see that your primary care physician, your pediatrician, your OBGYN, or whoever else actually is a DO as opposed to an MD. And, I think it's safe to say that there's nothing wrong with that at all. I think we look back maybe a decade ago, maybe a little further, and DOs maybe didn't have quite as good of a reputation. And you covered that because you talked about the MCAT scores aren't nearly as high as a MD school, or even their GPA or whatever else. But at the same time, the DOs receive very similar, if not the same, type of schooling. In addition to the OEMM, or the OMM, that's the manipulation, the osteo manipulation, and everything too. So in certain ways, they have a little bit more. And I think the key focus when it comes to doctors, whether they're DOs or MDs, is that residency program that they get into. Once they're done with their 4 years of schooling, they then get a chance to go into residency or fellowship. And it's there where they do a lot of their learning. It's there where those lines between a DO and an MD are very blurred. So by the time you get on the tail end of it all, there's not much of a difference. You guys are all absolutely correct. I think you'll find that certain personalities or backgrounds will lead DOs to look at the body as a whole and try and heal it that way as well. But you'll find surgeons who are DOs. You'll find holistic healers, medical doctors who are MDs as well. So keep that in mind. So let me ask you this. If you were someone applying for medical school and you get into both an MD and DO school, after your research, what do you think you would choose and why? I guess from both spectrums. Maybe if one of you thinks that they'd like to choose DO, go and talk about that. One of you thinks that they'd still want to choose MD, go and talk about that.
I can. Oh yeah, go Deg. You go ahead first this time.
Raise my hand
this time. I personally would still go MD route, even after doing this. I still believe in kind of going after the source in general, just going for it. And I mean, that's my thoughts. And I mean, like I said, I work with doctors and I see the work they do, and they still have patients that come back for more, and it's successful, and people heal and recover and do good. So that's just me personally, how I feel about it.
I was gonna do MD as well, but I don't know if anyone wants to go for DO.
D.
All right, perfect.
I would. I think I would like to focus more on the line. Well, I think it's like Brother Gage said, their line is becoming more blurred. I think they're incorporating more and more of each other's practices. Like I said, when I was calling around to different offices, there was DOs and MDs working in the same clinics. They worked together and they would consult with one another. So I think that because DOs are becoming more accepted and held up as respected and certified, that I think that they're looking into each other's fields and they're using more and more of each other's stuff. For a better way of saying it, but I would still choose DO just because I have a tendency to want to do things the natural way. Personally, that's just my personality.
If I can make just a quick comment too, I actually like the way that DOs go about practicing better. But the only thing that would make me want to be an MD is it is easy, based on the research that I did as well, easier to specialize after that. DOs tend to usually go and do family practice and that type of stuff. So if you really wanted to specialize in something, it did say that it was a little bit easier as an MD. to specialize in something. So that's the only, just based on my research, that's why I would choose MD.
And that's
I would.
Go ahead, Mary.
Oh, sorry. I would almost like. I don't know if this is weird to say, but I would almost choose to do both of them, because I feel like even being an MD or even being a DO, they go so much hand in hand, and you can like use the body, you can understand it more, and be able to use both of the research and practices and treatments and everything that you learn from going through school for both of them. You'd be able to use that. And I feel like they'd be able to either heal better or get more out of their medical experience or whatever. So.
Well, very good. I'd say, just to piggyback off what Lucas was saying as well, and we'll wrap things up with that, is the one thing to keep in mind is DO school is a bit more expensive. A lot of times it's just because it's a private institution. And so if you're worried about if you're worried about going $200,000 or $300,000 into debt for school, you may not want to go into $350,000 as opposed to the other. But and then exactly what you're saying too, Lucas, is once you're all the way through either one of the schoolings, it's very similar. However, getting into that residency program can be a little bit more tricky, a little bit more difficult if you go the DO route. But I think, once again, going off what Mary was saying, is you can take that holistic approach no matter which medical program you go through. When we talk about the body and healing the body, there's a strong science to it, obviously, but there's a strong spirituality to it as well. And I think that, as members of the church, that we have a good understanding about how those two can relate, and that they don't mix up with one another, but really they go hand in hand with one another to have a better understanding of how we work and how we should work and how to fix that as well. So I appreciate your guys' hard work on this presentation. You did a great job. I'll let you guys all go enjoy the rest of your evening, unless you have anything else you'd like to add.
No, that's it. Thank you.
Nope. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Have a great evening, everybody.
Thanks, you too.
Talk to you
You
later.
too.
Bye.
Bye.